Somewhere in Siberia, more than 2,000 kilometers from the front line, a fire is burning. No fighter jet dropped a bomb here, no soldier crossed a border. A drone built in a Ukrainian workshop did this. This is Ukraine's DeepStrike campaign, and by mid-2026, it had already hit every single one of Russia's 10 largest oil refineries. Stick around because how Ukraine built this capability from almost nothing is one of the strangest industrial stories of the war. And if you want more grounded breakdowns like this, subscribe, we cut through the noise. Rewind to 2022. Ukraine had almost no ability to strike Russia at range. Western allies, worried about escalation, restricted how their donated weapons could be used. HIMARS, ADAMS, when they came with strings attached. Don't hit Russian soil. So Ukraine did something unusual. It stopped waiting. At the start of the full-scale invasion, Ukraine's entire domestic defense industry was worth about $1 billion. By 2025, its long-range weapons production capacity alone had reportedly grown to $25 billion. The seed of this was the Neptune, originally a Soviet-style anti-ship missile, developed years earlier in response to Russia's annexation of Crimea. Nobody expected much from it. Then, in April 2022, a small number of Neptunes struck the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet. It sank. That single moment proved something to Ukrainian planners. Home-built weapons could hurt Russia in ways nobody had budgeted for. From there, engineers modified the Neptune into a land attack cruise missile, the so-called Long Neptune, extending its reach toward 1,000 kilometers. But the real transformation came from somewhere unexpected. Private companies, not state arsenals. A firm called Firepoint began building long-range attack drones, the FP1 series, capable of striking targets over 1,500 kilometers away. Ask yourself this: how does a country under active invasion, with its power grid under constant attack, build an entire missile industry from scratch in 3 years? That's the story we're telling. By late 2025, that same company unveiled something far bigger. A missile called the Flamingo. The Flamingo, 6,000 kilograms, a warhead of over 1 metric ton, a claimed range of up to 3,000 kilometers. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the distance from Kyiv to the Ural Mountains. Nowhere in western Russia is truly out of reach anymore. But here's the twist most people miss. For months after Flamingo was announced, almost nothing happened. Analysts started calling it overhyped. Production was slow. Public skepticism grew. Then, in February 2026, that changed. Ukraine's general staff confirmed using Flamingo missiles to strike the Votkinsk missile plant, a facility that builds Russia's Iskander and Bulava missiles, roughly 1,400 kilometers from the border. This wasn't a lucky hit on an oil tank. This was a strike on the factory that builds Russia's own missiles. Think about that for a second. Ukraine was now reaching back into the machine that builds the weapons being fired at its own cities. Meanwhile, on a parallel track, Ukraine's drone production was scaling in a way few Western militaries could match. Reports placed 2025 drone production somewhere between 2.5 and 4 million units. The plan for 2026? Around 7 million. Not one exquisite weapon built slowly and carefully, thousands of cheap ones built fast, accepting that many would fail or be shot down. Here's the uncomfortable question worth sitting with. Is this actually a better model of modern warfare than the West's approach of a few extremely expensive, extremely precise weapons? Quantity, cheapness, speed versus exquisite and slow. By mid-2026, Zelensky himself confirmed the numbers publicly. Over 1,000 long-range fire missions carried out since the start of the year, with strike assets reportedly able to reach targets over 3,000 kilometers away. And crucially, this wasn't random. Officials described it as a continuously updated priority target list, focused on one goal: weakening Russia's ability to sustain the war. So what exactly made the list? That's next. Oil. More than anything else, oil. In June 2026 alone, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense reported striking 11 Russian oil refineries and 8 defense industry facilities. Among them, the Moscow refinery, a plant supplying up to 40% of the capital's gasoline and half of its diesel, hit. The Ufa refining complex, one of Russia's largest, hit. Facilities in Samara, Yaroslavl, Nizhnekamsk, and 3 refineries in Krasnodar, all hit. By July 2026, drones had attacked Russian refineries at least 194 times that year alone. Since the war began, the cumulative total passed 300 strikes. Ukraine's own general staff estimated that by early July, roughly 43% of Russia's designed refining capacity had been knocked offline at points during the campaign. Independent assessments from the International Energy Agency put the figure lower, above 20%, but the direction was undeniable. This wasn't a few isolated hits. It was attrition, sustained and deliberate. Here's the human element people forget. This isn't abstract. Fuel shortages hit ordinary Russian regions. Gas stations rationed. Diesel prices climbed. War brought home, not through invasion, but through empty pumps. And the strategy kept evolving. By late July, the Financial Times reported that Ukraine had shifted tactics again, moving away from simply starting fires toward targeting the specific, hard-to-replace industrial components inside refineries, crude distillation units, specialized processing equipment, parts that can take months, sometimes years, to rebuild or import under sanctions. Think about what that means strategically. It's not about the biggest explosion on camera. It's about which single component, if destroyed, keeps a refinery offline the longest. That's not battlefield drama. That's industrial engineering weaponized. Meanwhile, strikes weren't limited to oil, military and satellite communications centers, naval assets, weapons component factories. The campaign's stated goal, according to Ukraine's defense ministry, was straightforward: deprive Russia's war machine of fuel, communications, and materiel, the resources it needs to keep fighting. Not headline chasing, resource denial. By August, the range record itself kept climbing. Strikes confirmed past 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine's own border, deep into western Siberia, a region that, 3 years earlier, would have felt entirely untouchable. So what actually changed? Start with the obvious: geography stopped being a shield. For most of this war, Russia's deep interior was, functionally, a safe zone. Factories could run. Refineries could operate without worrying about drones from Ukraine. That assumption is gone. Second, and this is the part analysts keep circling back to, Ukraine did this largely without depending on Western-supplied long-range weapons. The Flamingo, the FP series drones, the long Neptune, domestically built, domestically funded, domestically decided. Zelensky has publicly called this program Ukraine's long-range sanctions, a deterrent arsenal built at home rather than borrowed abroad. That phrase is worth sitting with. Sanctions, but delivered by drone. Third, the economic bleed. Refining capacity knocked offline doesn't just hurt fuel supply to Russian forces, it hurts export revenue, the money funding the war in the first place. Analysts have described the refinery campaign bluntly: a deliberate effort to drain the Kremlin's wallet by hitting the machinery that turns crude oil into money. But, and this matters for honesty's sake, this campaign has not ended the war. Russian refineries have proven capable of partial repair. Air defenses have adapted. Some strikes have failed or missed entirely. Open-source analysts have noted mixed results, particularly in Flamingo's earlier deployments. This isn't a silver bullet. It's attrition, and attrition is slow, uneven, and costly on both sides. There's also a harder question underneath all of this, and it's worth asking directly. What does it mean that a mid-sized country, 3 years into a defensive war, built an independent strike arsenal capable of hitting targets 3,000 kilometers away, largely without asking anyone's permission? That's not just a battlefield story. That's a story about what happens when a nation decides it can no longer wait on allies to define the boundaries of its own defense. Here's why this matters beyond Ukraine. For decades, deep strike capability belonged almost exclusively to major powers, the US, Russia, China, built around expensive, exquisite platforms. Stealth bombers, precision-guided cruise missiles costing millions per unit. Ukraine just demonstrated a different model. Mass-produced drones costing tens of thousands of dollars, not millions. Built at a rate of over 100 units a day by mid-2025. Cheap enough to lose in bulk. Numerous enough that some always get through. Defense analysts are already studying this as a case study, not just in Kyiv, but in Washington, Taipei, and Seoul. The lesson isn't drones are good. The lesson is sharper than that. A determined, mid-sized state can now build independent long-range strike capacity outside the traditional great power missile club. That has implications far beyond this war for how any future conflict anywhere might open. Whether that's a stabilizing development or a dangerous precedent, reasonable people disagree. But the fact itself isn't in dispute anymore. So let's recap. Ukraine went from almost no strike capability in 2022 to hitting every major Russian refinery by 2026 using missiles and drones it designed and built itself at a fraction of Western costs. Every one of Russia's 10 largest refineries struck. Here's the question I'll leave you with. When a nation under invasion can build this kind of independent long-range force in 3 years, what does that mean for how the next war anywhere in the world gets fought? Let me know in the comments. If this breakdown helped you understand the war more clearly, hit like and subscribe for more grounded, source-checked military analysis. No speculation, just what's actually documented. Next time, we go inside the drone factories themselves. Subscribe so you don't miss it.